Hi there lovelies, I'm Rhonda Crimes. I'm a life and leadership coach supporting everyday people just like you to reflect and rework your everyday stories so you can step into the everyday leadership of your families and communities and create compelling, meaningful and fruitful lives every day. I'm continuing our journey into the gifts of imperfection with Brené Brown, breaking the book into bite-sized chunks Mondays through Fridays with short videos. It's my hope that in doing this you can watch or listen on the fly instead of having to find too much time, as well as having to read the book. And so today let's talk about the second of the three gifts of imperfection, compassion. What do you think of when you hear the word compassion? Before Brené's work, for me it was like taking empathy to the next level. It felt like stepping right into the other person's pain or discomfort and then almost instantly trying to help make it better for them or find the right way to show them that I got it, and then we could all move on more quickly. Certainly not dwelling. That was a bit too uncomfortable. So there was and still is lots of work to unpack with compassion for me. When we look at the origin of the word, like the good word geek that I am, compassion comes from the Latin compati, a combination of com, the word for with, together, and pati, to suffer, with a mid-14th century meaning feeling the sorrow or deep tenderness for one who is suffering or experiencing misfortune. Brené shares the work of American Buddhist nun Pema Chödrön from her book The Places That Scare You to provide us with the wholehearted meaning for compassion used in this journey. When we practice generating compassion, we can expect to experience the fear of our pain. Compassion practice is daring. It involves learning to relax and allow ourselves to move more gently toward what scares us. Can you, like me, feel how counterintuitive that seems? When we hear of someone suffering, we want to fix it quickly. More often than not, because it's too uncomfortable for us to stay with it. Their discomfort somehow becomes about us, and then our own discomfort, which we don't want to get into. Well, that's often how it felt for me. Brené suggests that compassion is also not our default response to pain, either of our own or other people's. Rather, she says, it's to self-protect. We protect ourselves by looking for someone or something to blame, or we sometimes shield ourselves by turning to judgment or immediately going into fix-it mode. Did anyone else get all of those self-protect responses like me? I was so happy to keep reading that Chödrön suggests that we must be honest and forgiving about when and how we shut down. How we need to draw from the wholeness of our experience, our suffering, our empathy, as well as our cruelty and terror. She went on to say, compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded. It's a relationship between equals. Only when we know our own darkness well can we be present to the darkness of others. Compassion becomes real when we recognize our shared humanity. Shared humanity is about acceptance of ourselves and of others. But as Brené points out, it's difficult to accept people when they're hurting us or taking advantage of us or walking all over us. She goes further to say, if we really want to practice compassion, we have to start by setting boundaries and holding people accountable for their behaviour. It's way too easy in the short term to blame and shame than to take the time to create boundaries and then hold people accountable to them. We can get so busy pointing fingers at others or ducking and weaving to avoid the finger being pointed at us that we don't give ourselves time to consider the alternatives. Brené writes, we're so heavy on self-righteous anger and so low on compassion. I wonder what your answers to the questions she asks are. Wouldn't it be better if we could be kinder but firmer? How would our lives be different if there were less blame and more accountability? What would our work and home lives look like if we judged less but had more respect for boundaries? Imagine, if you will, and please substitute your own version of the protagonist in our story for your own clarity. Maybe it's your child, a spouse, or a workmate. So what if your child continues to not follow your expectations of not using their phone for social media after 9 p.m. on a school night? What are their consequences? It's important that they be appropriate. If your kid knows that all that's going to happen is there'll be another 4-minute diatribe of you telling them how disappointed you are and how irresponsible they are, and then throw in some idle threats of what you'll do next time, the chances are that they can withstand that and then keep reoffending. But what if instead of the regular tongue lashing, the accountability tool was that their access to data was to be compromised, or the phone was confiscated, or some other meaningful to them consequence that you followed through with every time? I can see a lot of people will be rolling their eyes going, you've got no idea, Rhonda, you don't live my life. And you're right, I don't. But I would question you, and I'd love to have a conversation with you about individual things. Anyway, from her research, Brené revealed that compassionate people are boundaried people. She found of herself that before her breakdown, sure, she appeared to be a sweeter person on the outside, but she was way more judgmental and resentful and angry on the inside. Today, she says, I'm genuinely more compassionate, less judgmental and resentful, and way more serious about boundaries. I have no idea what that combination looks like on the outside, but it feels pretty powerful on the inside. It's interesting that we find it so difficult to comprehend that we can be compassionate and accepting, but still hold someone to account for the behaviour. She assures us in the book that we can, and that the best way, the key, is to separate people from their behaviours, to address what they're doing, not who they are. Another pit we can trip into is convincing ourselves to dislike or hate someone so we can justify that they deserve to be held accountable, and we can feel better for that fact. When we don't set boundaries, we can feel neglected, mistreated, used, or cast off. This is the playground of the victim. And to gain some power, we can resort to attacking who they are rather than what they are doing. Brené warns, it's dangerous to our relationships and our well-being to get mired in shame and blame, or to be full of self-righteous anger. It's also impossible to practice compassion from a place of resentment. I encourage you, as I will continue, to notice when we start pointing the finger or feeling resentment and ask, what boundary appears to have been crossed? Then, even more importantly, has the boundary been effectively established with this person? And then, how will you hold them to account going forward? We do this from Queen energy. If we're going to practice acceptance and compassion, we need boundaries and accountability. Now, as always, my darlings, if your now is not the picture that you've painted for yourself and you'd like any help on this discovery path, or maybe something completely different that you intuitively know or feel isn't letting your true colours shine through, then please do get in touch with me. You can do it really easily. Just leave a comment, send me a private message, drop me an email, or pop into my Calendly online diary using the link I've provided, and we can set up an obligation-free curiosity call and see if we're a good fit for each other. Much love until next time.